the state of California does by far the most boxing and MMA of any state there is. You double what everyone else does. So you have all of these fights. You've gotten all of this data and information. You've got a program going through the University of Harvard about weight cutting and things that are happening. Where is it that you see that there could possibly be a change that would be for the better?
Well, I mean, John, I know it's going to sound punitive, but at the next commission meeting, that 15% cutoff is going to, I feel like that will be voted for. Commission's already voted for it once. I think they'll vote for it again. And then I'll promulgate that with the Office of Administrative Law, which means you show up on Friday for a weigh-in and you weigh 170. The next day, you can't be more than 195 and a half. John, that is a reasonable expectation. If you tell the public you're a welterweight, you should be able to be below 195 and a half pounds. You should be able to be below that. The problem is, and you saw our data, we've got quite a few fighters that aren't making that. And the state of California is not going to regulate that once we pass that regulation. It's not going to be up to Andy Foster's discretion anymore because I get put in a box and I have to kill these fights and I do it. It's my job, but it's not a pleasant experience sitting there. If everybody knows the rules, you cannot be more than 15% above where you were the day before. That's a reasonable expectation, and people will begin to follow the rules. And that's the first step, John, I feel like, to putting a line in the sand.
Well, that's exactly what, when we were at the meeting, that I suggested. I had suggested not exceeding the next weight class above. I mean, you guys are giving them more at 15%. You're giving more than that next weight class above in most cases. So why is it not just considered to be the next weight class above?
Josh, really, to be honest with you, that came from we took notes at that thing. This was partially your idea that it came from. That's where we got this. The problem is, and John saw the information.
Oh my God. We just blew that one, didn't we?
Yeah, I've got a big head, Andy. Now I want to just say thank you very much for letting everyone know that I actually came up with a great idea. Thank you very much.
Not that great, because here's your problem.
Go ahead. Let's hear
Andy,
it.
did you not try to do 10% before, and it just created nothing but problems for people as far as getting the suspensions and what promoters want and everything, and that's why you're now moving to that 15%?
Well, John, what we had before was 10%. 10% is still the magic number. That's where we're hoping fighters don't exceed. And we flag them above 10%. We send them weight notices and all these different things. But when we initially come up with this plan, I did not want it to be a punitive thing because this thing's for the health and safety of the athletes. So it's like I'm having to argue with athletes to be safe, and I didn't want to be punitive about it. So, but John, you saw the numbers. I sent them to you today. I have a problem. We have a problem here in California. And if we have it, I'm sure the other states have it as well. There are a lot of fighters, not a lot, but there's enough to where 15% is such a large amount, and we've got people exceeding that you've got to start somewhere. And Dr. Wallace and the medical committee's idea is let's start at 15%, have that for a while, and slowly try to move it down, slowly over time. But, the 15%'s a line in the sand. It's the first time it's done. And Josh, it's entirely reasonable. A welterweight should be able to be below 195 and a half the day of the fight.
Yeah. I know that you guys have had several conversations with the promotions, but if you were to say, hey, look, we're going to start with the 15% and then start working our way down to potentially 10. But let's talk about potentially adding just one. I think the standard right now is just one weight class. It's say 175, 165, 175, and then it goes 10 pounds, right? Now just don't exceed that 10 pounds. And then as the fighters get better, John, I know you're laughing right now, but just hear me out.
Go ahead.
And I understand he's talking about moving it from 15 and working his way down. And I'm talking about over time.
You realize you're
as well.
talking about less than 10%.
I am.
You're
yes,
talking
I
about
am.
less than 10% by far.
I am. I do.
And right now,
I do understand
now at 15%, they have about 3% of the fighters that are over that. And at
Yes.
10%, you have about
Yes.
20% of the fighters over it.
So if you would let me finish. So
Go
if
ahead.
you continue to go on, right, and you're saying, Andy, over time, that you're hoping that these fighters will eventually start taking care of their bodies and then realize that they just got to go to the next weight class up. So now if you actually implement 10-pound weight classes all the way up to, say, 195 or 180, keep it at 185, 195. If you do that, then those fighters don't have to worry about cutting as much weight because they will eventually put themselves into a box of, say, 185, 175, 165, because they understand that it actually is hindering my performance and I can fight with these guys at 165. I can fight with these guys at 175. You're going to split a little bit of those guys, obviously, but if you had these conversations with, because I know John tells me all the time, the weight class is already there. 170, 165 and 175 is there. For the health and the safety of the fighters, let's talk to these promotions and say, hey, this is the best way also to go along with the weight cuts to make sure that our fighters are safe. And if they're not understanding, then that puts a lot more of the burden back on them instead of putting it on the commissions for having to do so much regulation. I know you guys are trying. It's obvious. I've been in the meetings, but has that not been a conversation with them?
It's hard, Josh. Look, it's a great idea. I'm not saying it's not a good idea, but I have to have promoter buy-in to do this.
Yeah,
the
I
promoters
get it.
have got to want, and when I say the promoters, I'm specifically talking about the matchmakers. Okay, I think that's the important piece of this. The matchmakers have got to want to fight. And look, I don't even want to put it on the matchmakers, guys, because it's not really. They're being told by the fighters, "Oh yeah, I mean, I can make 155, and the guy's walking at 205 right now." They're being told these things, and that's why John, you saw the data I sent. I mean, I've got all this data. When we get one of these fighters, we kind of know, and then we see what weight class based on where the promoter submits the card, where they're trying to fight them at. And the first thing I'll do to the staff is I'll say, "Okay, Lee, you go ahead, Tricia. We need to wait on this one, and this one." And I haven't really saw, John, what you're talking about, like with the gaming of the scale. I'm not saying it could not happen, because it absolutely could, especially if you give the fighter a chance to video it. What I mean is, like, it's been my experience just when we do these web things that they haven't cheated on our videos that I can tell yet, because they're about that same weight when we weigh them a week or two out, when we see them when they show up for the fight week. But they absolutely could be cheated, so that's something to consider as well.
100% agree.